Hello everyone, John the Morgile here, checking in for a new static planar Earth video for you. I hope you do enjoy it. When we begin to peel back the layers of the ball Earth deception, we find a variety of examples of false claims of exclusivity on behalf of the ball Earth proponents, which fall apart under examination. Observations which are claimed to only work on a spinning ball Earth, but are indeed compatible with a static planar Earth hypothesis. This is a telltale signature of a pathological liar, that is, to claim that certain universally understood facts and observations are only possible within a specific framework that you are cheerleading for, thus nullifying the need for the individual to consider such facts within some other alternative framework. They have done this throughout history, evidently in order to sell our budding toddlers on the theory that the world is a spinning ball. True to form, we are presented with certain facts which are framed as being only compatible with a spinning ball Earth. In this video, we're going to examine such claims of exclusivity that again fall apart under the light of logical and skeptical examination. If we can show that such facts not only jive with a flat and motionless Earth hypothesis, but actually seem to fit a flat Earth scenario far better than a spinning ball Earth, then you would think that the argument and the debate is over. Unfortunately, many generations of programming have gone into this deception, so I imagine it's going to take at least one or two generations to get such nonsense out of our societal curriculum. So we're going to start with circumnavigation. Circumnavigation is, of course, the ability to sail around the world on a single heading, say west or east, and if you continue on that heading, you wind up right back where you started from. This is claimed to be exclusive proof that the Earth is a ball. We're often told that the concept of circumnavigation is only possible upon a spherical Earth, and since people have indeed circumnavigated the world, then according to this axiom, then the world is therefore proven as a sphere. Such claims of exclusivity by Team Globetard are ubiquitous. We see them everywhere. Firstly, circumnavigation is definitely possible upon a flat Earth with a central magnetic pole, so the claim that it's exclusive to a ball Earth is flatly false. If we take the time to logically consider the claim, this is obviously and inarguably true. So then, what does that say about Team Globetard and the aforementioned claim of exclusivity? It speaks volumes to the honest casual observer, since the truth doesn't need lies to reinforce its validity in the eyes of the public. Furthermore, circumnavigation happens all the time in theory, as during our modern age plenty of people have flown around the world many times, probably not in a single go, of course, but over time. And this, as a rule, occurs in an east to west or a west to east fashion. Assuming the flat Earth layout is something like the depiction found in the AE projection, then it makes perfect sense that we don't see circumnavigation occurring in a north to south orientation. If the world was a ball, as they claim, then we would see transpolar circumnavigation, really specifically in the south is what we're talking about here. We'd see it all the time. Since, the polar areas on the ball, specifically the south polar area, would be a shortcut to all sorts of southern destinations. And yet what we find in reality is that this rule does apply in the north, so the central area, but not in the south. And flight routes avoid the far south, the south polar area, at all costs and travel way out of the way for thousands and thousands of miles to arrive at southern destinations, which should otherwise have been relatively short flights if that sort of south polar shortcut was used instead. But of course we know that there is no south polar shortcut because the Earth is flat, it's not a ball. So there is no shortcut in the south, that only applies to the north, which is what you see on flight routes, like it's pretty obvious. Furthermore, we find dubious and convoluted attempts of Team Globetard to present evidence of transpolar circumnavigation, which under close inspection is questionable at best, and indeed false. For example, the Antarctica Cup race, it's a yacht race, which is actually east to west circumnavigation, but they call it the Antarctica Cup Challenge. Okay, in this letter from CEO of Antarctica Cup to the chairman of the Russian Senate, it reads, "Dear Mr. Marinov, greetings from Albany in Western Australia. It gives me great pleasure, blah, 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 blah." The important part I wanted to read here is it says the race is a non-stop circumnavigation of Antarctica conducted on the Antarctica Cup racetrack with boundaries located at latitude 45 degrees south and 60 degrees south, requiring competitors to battle some of the most challenging conditions of any sporting event. So 45 degrees south and 60 degrees south. That is, of course, keeping in accordance with the Antarctica Treaty, where private citizens can't travel further south than 60 degrees south without express written permission from certain world governments. So lo and behold, the Antarctica Cup racetrack doesn't even approach the South Arctic Circle. It certainly doesn't even attempt to claim transpolar circumnavigation. It is merely east to west circumnavigation in the far south, but really not even that far south because they don't even approach the South Arctic Circle. It is a misnomer, the Antarctica Cup, because it only really adheres to the 40s and 50 degrees south latitude, never even approaches the Antarctic Circle, certainly doesn't enter it. The truth is, the world is flat, and by all accounts, the continents are situated around the central North Pole, which is the magnetic center of the world. Any attempt at transpolar circumnavigation fails, as the sort of trajectory of a plane heading south from, say, Australia will not eventually end up in South America or South Africa, but would instead just head away from our realm and possibly towards some other geothermal realm which neighbors our own. But certainly they wouldn't be rounding the bottom of some giant ball as claimed by Team Globetrotting. So next we're going to talk about the Coriolis Effect. Since we see counter-rotational cyclonic forces in either hemisphere, of course, Team Globetrotting claims that is only possible upon a spherical Earth, and the cause of this counter-rotational cyclonic forces is the Coriolis Effect, thus proving the world is a spinning ball. So the definition of the Coriolis force is, this is a quote, an effect whereby a mass moving in a rotating system experiences a force, the Coriolis force, acting perpendicular to the direction of motion and to the axis of rotation. On the Earth, the effect tends to deflect moving objects to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern, and is important in the formation of cyclonic weather systems, end quote. So while the Coriolis force is an actual, natural, sort of fictitious force, as it were, but it's not the cause of cyclonic counterrotation. Cyclonic counterrotation is a rule of nature wherein large cyclonic forces like hurricanes, and not toilets by the way, but the hurricanes and maybe tornadoes rotate in opposite directions depending on the hemisphere of the world. This rule is, as rules tend to be, broken sometimes, and you'll find cyclones that are rotating in a direction that they should not be, but that's sort of besides the point, but that rule is broken sometimes. But the concept that counter-rotational cyclonic forces was caused by the Coriolis effect, as so common from Team Globetrotting, stems from the natural observation about hurricanes, which was then conveniently adopted and adapted by globe Earth proponents to prove their point at the exclusion of any other line of reasoning, such as a flat and motionless Earth, but they do this primarily to avoid the discussion altogether, and simultaneously they try to discredit the flat earther by default in order to make their logical observations and deductions be irrelevant, since we all know they're crazy, as the Earth is a spinning ball. Everybody knows that, right? At any rate, if you actually think about it, if the Earth was a spinning ball, all the winds should hypothetically be in an east to west fashion, if of course the spinning ball and its attached atmosphere obeyed the laws of physics, as everything else found in nature does, but alas, that is simply not the case, which is yet another signature of Team Globetrotting. Indeed, the spinning ball Earth and its attached atmosphere defy the known laws of physics in many, many ways, But we're sort of expected to believe that the spinning ball Earth and its attached atmosphere, housed in some infinite vacuum called space, are exempt from a seemingly never-ending litany of immutable physical laws described in the so-called laws of physics. Starting with the very obvious and overlooked fact that anywhere else in nature you must have a solid structure, separating a vacuum from some other enclosed or pressurized environment, all the way down to things like the Coriolis Effect, which is a little bit more convoluted. They furthermore claim that military snipers consider the Coriolis Effect, but not artillerymen, and that ends up being a complete misnomer and a misunderstanding of the facts once you look into it. So next we're going to talk about gravity. What goes up must come down. Indeed, this simple law of physics is a very simple truth here on the world, which is understood by the youngest toddler down to the silliest puppy, really. Everybody gets that, what goes up must come down. This immutable law of physics is, of course, adopted and adapted by Team Globetard to prove their point, at the exclusion of any other line of reasoning. If you're seeing a pattern here, it's because there is one. Team Globetard, believe it or not, also understood what goes up must come down, if you can believe it, which, if you stop to think about it for 10 seconds, is a huge problem for their narrative indeed. For the last thing that you would expect, assuming a spinning ball Earth, where, standing at the equator, you're supposedly traveling over 1,000 miles per hour relative to some poor cold bastard at the North Pole, and the last thing that you would expect to see would be what goes up must come down, you see. For another a natural, immutable law of nature that can't be defied is centrifugal force, which would dictate that some object attached to its hypothetical gyro edge traveling at 1,000 miles per hour around the curve of the Earth, then loosed, said object would certainly not tend to drop towards the ground, but instead should tend away from the gyro edge at a right angle to the axis some 4,000 miles underfoot. Of course, we're then told that what goes up must come down is exclusive proof of the ball Earth, which is probably the most obviously ridiculous claim made by Team Globetard, but indeed that's just what they do. You would simply not expect to see what goes up must come down on a ball Earth spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, and yet, since that's what we see, the Globetards had to adopt and adapt that into something that was exclusive proof of their concept. You see, that's a very clever thing that they've just done time and time again. Day and night is another example. Here we go. Oftentimes when you mention flat Earth to some regular person who has never considered this topic, they're going to argue with you that the Earth is not flat and motionless, but instead it's a spinning ball, and they'll give you some list of reasons why that is so. They've never really tested this line of reasoning, just as we never did a few years ago, but they have believed in it, much like the belief in Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny, and they believe it because something called science tells them that. One of the reasons they will often cite that the world is a spinning ball is because we have day and night, and that's only possible on a ball Earth. The sun only shines on one half of the ball at a time, and therefore day and night is exclusive proof that the world is a sphere. The fact is, they have never tried to challenge that claim of so-called science, this belief system which cannot and should not be questioned or challenged. Quite the antithesis to science, really, but to suggest that I never heard the claim of ball earthers that day and night are exclusive to a sphere, and then suggest that I am literally telling the world that the Earth is flat and motionless after living in the world my whole life without ever coming to understand this process called day and night, and how it is somehow exclusive proof of the ball, I'd never heard that either, is probably one of the most hilariously stupid things that I've ever seen coughed forth from the annals of Team Globetard. Of course, science, if nothing else, is the pursuit of personal understanding based on verifiable, tangible reality, not a set of belief systems as so many Globetards seem to think. You don't need a license to science, and you don't need a degree to science, so go science. Everybody. It's fun. Seasons is another one, and I've got 10 more of these in a list here. The old tilt of the earth. This is tiresome, but indeed I can remember in school the claim somewhere being made that the change of seasons proved something about the earth, but I'm not sure exactly. It's claimed that old Eratosthenes was the first to give us knowledge of the tilt of the earth, relative to the ecliptic plane, of course. At any rate, the seasons on flat Earth are obviously caused by the sun's oscillating path around the central north, and the seasons are thus explained perfectly on the flat Earth. I won't go so far as to say it's the only way that seasons could work, but, that's the job for the globetards, of course. Seeing further from higher, this is another one. Team Globetard claims that go down to the beach and watch the sunset, and then take an elevator to the top of the skyscraper behind you and you can watch the sunset again. And they claim that this is because the Earth is a ball. And essentially what this claim is that you can see further from higher, which is true even on a flat Earth, or even on, say, a basketball court. So go to a basketball court and lay on your belly and make a note of where the horizon is. It'll be somewhere before the free throw line, right? And then at the same basketball court, get off your belly and stand up, and now your horizon is going to be some 3 miles away, right, if you're standing at the beach or whatever. Okay, so seeing further from higher has nothing to do with the Earth being a ball. We certainly can't infer that the basketball court is a sphere just because you can see further from higher on that, and so therefore the claim that you can see further from higher, therefore the Earth is a ball, is null and void. You can see further from higher on flat Earth too, right? You can see further from higher on flat basketball court, on flat Earth. It's not something that's exclusive to one or the other. And yet, of course, Team Globetard indeed does claim that very thing, as they do. We see the sun and moon are round, so the Earth must also be round. We see the predominant heavenly luminaries, the sun and the moon in the sky, which are, from our perspective, circles. We've been conditioned to believe them to be spherical objects by the likes of NASA, who even claimed to have visited the moon and walked around, played golf, raced buggies, and frolicked around on the surface of the moon during several amazing landmark trips during the late 60s and early 1970s, known as the Apollo missions, of course. Now, NASA has been busted faking pretty much everything, just all sorts of stuff they've been caught faking, like trips to the ISS, orbital nail-biters, and cliffhangers where the engineers of the ISS somehow thought it would be prudent to put critical life support systems and other important components of the ISS, which would need periodic fixing, on the outside of the craft instead of on the inside, of course. But since the 1960s, the sort of boneheads at NASA never even tried to go back to the moon, sans, of course, the alleged Chinese space agency, who indeed claims to have visited the moon more recently, but I submit the American fake space agency never had any intention of returning to the moon because their mission was already accomplished. Their true mission was to convince the people of the world that they had visited the giant sphere in the sky and walked around on it. In accomplishing this astronomical forgery, they cemented the notion into the public mind that the heavenly luminaries, the circles of light in the sky, were terra firma, physical objects capable of supporting the concepts of little Freemasons playing golf on its surface. By convincing the world of that, convincing them that the moon is a terra firma destination, and while incapable of supporting life as we know it due to the alleged inhospitable temperatures, barometric pressure, lack of oxygen, etc., it is, according to them, capable of at least supporting the concept of walking around upon a spinning sphere in space. In reality, the heavenly luminaries are lights in the sky. Whether they are physical spheres or not is sort of irrelevant to the conversation, but from the angle of the deceivers, it was imperative that we imagine the moon to be a spherical object, just like the Earth, which creates the framework for the argument that goes something like, well, the sun, the moon, and all the other planets in our solar system are spheres, so what's so special about the flat Earth? It's a flat surface when all the other planets and even our moon are round spheres? It confines the Earth to necessarily being one of many planets in our solar system in the minds of the masses, making it practically unthinkable to consider that the world might actually be a stationary plane. A sort of psychological failsafe which creates the straw man argument that flat earthers are so self-absorbed and egocentrical that we somehow believe that the world is special, and the laws of physics involving gravity and the vacuum of space somehow fail to apply to the flat earth, making the entire argument seem absolutely foolish. The fact that NASA astronauts walked around on the moon in the late 1960s goes to show you that the lights in the sky are indeed terra firma destinations which support golf and buggy racing, and the world that we live on is also a terra firma sphere in the vacuum of space. So what makes you think it's flat, you silly retard? That was their angle, and if you go back and look at just the absolute shit show that was the Apollo missions, it's laughable. I mean, it was clearly, obviously shot on a soundstage. There's nothing that's going to fool any casual observer today, but at the time and people's trust in the government, they pulled it off. I mean, they really did trick everybody into thinking that they were up there walking around on the moon. But this is why NASA's mission was so important, alluding to the Apollo missions. And it indeed explains why NASA has made no attempt to return to the moon, nor have they made any real plans to go to more distant destinations such as Mars. I mean, I'm sure they're arguing about going to Mars, but they're not actually planning on going. So I'm sure that if they're allowed to continue indefinitely, NASA would indeed hoax a trip to Mars, but I optimistically don't believe NASA has even another 5 years left in its lifespan. The truth about their obvious dubious shenanigans has just gotten too large for them to keep this image going for too much longer. And I still maintain that if NASA is anything, it is a large money laundering operation, but that's just me. The truth is, the sun and the moon are not terra firma destinations in the sky. They're mysterious light sources, yes. As far as we can tell, definitely appear as circular according to our third-dimensional perspective of them. They may actually be spherical physical objects. I'm not ruling that out, but I personally lean towards them being non-physical altogether, potentially interconnected somehow, as their similarities are just too numerous to count. But you certainly cannot walk around on them, and they are nothing like the Earth. The so-called other planets are also not terra firma spheres in the sky either, but are instead merely light sources which exist above the surface of the flat and motionless physical Earth plane. What forces keep these lights aloft and in motion above the surface of the Earth? That's a mystery which we need as a rational species to solve, but unfortunately, as long as entities such as NASA are taking in billions and billions of dollars annually to fake space and lie to us about the heavens, then we will simply never understand the natural order of things, nor our place in the natural universe. The Earth is the physical plane of reality. It is an electromagnetic dynamo, similar to a dielectric plane. The heavenly luminaries are merely secondary features of the gigantic and primary body in nature, the dielectric Earth plane. By understanding the truth about the heavenly luminaries, huge leaps in technological understanding and development of our spiritual selves would undoubtedly be soon to follow, some grand awakening of the human species into our true nature, unlocking potential lying dormant within us as a result of the great deception which we've been living under for so many generations. The deceivers have gone to great lengths to hide the truth about nature and about ourselves, wherein the ball Earth lies are a sort of a linchpin or an Achilles heel, which unlocks something within ourselves which has been hidden from us once we realize the truth about the Earth and ourselves. So with that, guys, I'm going to wrap this video up. Thanks so much for watching. I do appreciate you. If you'd like to contribute to the channel effort, Your contributions are welcomed and appreciated. Your prayers and positive vibes are as well. Links below. Thanks so much for watching. As always, spread the word, spread the world, and peace out, everybody. God bless.